I was recently talking with a friend about how my dad met his second wife when he was in Norway on a business trip, and she mentioned that she was Norwegian, and I thought, I've known her for like over a decade, and never once occurred to me to find out what her ethnic background is, and she is mentioning about how it's kind of interesting and strange that some people are really concerned about what other people's ethnic background is, as if it's going to make a big difference if that person is from, their ancestors are from Norway or Sweden or Poland or Italy or whatever. And, if you're in the general Caucasian, demographic, it's hard to tell a lot of times what someone's background is just by looking at them, and so people ask a lot, and I've never had much interest in that kind of thing, and I think it might in part be influenced by the fact that since I was adopted and didn't know my ethnic heritage until I did some research when I was 29, that I really grew up without ethnic identity other than white person, and I think that like my grandparents would be into finding out what are the ethnicities of various friends or girlfriends or my sister's boyfriend or whatever. It seemed like, now, is she Scottish or Irish? It's like finding out how to pigeonhole somebody, I think, is this tendency that people have. Like, when you're getting to know somebody, that can be a way of better understanding them, but as time goes by, these things matter less. And I found that when I was taking a counseling psychology class in multiculturalism, the intention of the class was to help us in the role of healer to understand that people are bringing different kinds of worldviews into the counseling session, and to not project your own concepts of reality onto the client, which made sense. But the shadow side of that I thought was going on was that you could also then, if you learn about what are typical tendencies of the Mexican culture, African American culture, and these kind of things, then you can have another kind of predisposed thought about what that person's reality is that doesn't really match that person's reality at all if they're not identified with certain traditions or whatever. And so really the ultimate way of getting to know another person is to ask them questions about their worldview and not make assumptions based upon what their ethnic background is. I think that this tendency towards getting wrapped up in ethnicity is kind of coming to light recently since we have a black president, and that his external identity as black is influenced a lot by how he looks. He spent a lot more time growing up with a white mom, but because he looked black, that was how he was seen by people, and that affected his identity quite a bit. And that is different than, like, I had a friend when I was living in Arizona who his father was black and his mother was white, like Obama, but this friend looked white, and people would make assumptions based on how he looked, and sometimes would make racist statements about blacks, and he would be like, "You don't know who my dad is, do you?" And so there's this component not only of the background of different ethnic cultural components to one's identity and so forth, but basically how you look is a big deal. And I think that the Tea Party movement wouldn't have gained as much traction as it has, although I think it has a certain kind of ceiling that it's hitting upon right now, that it's not going to have that much influence. But a lot of it is about racism, covert racism. Not for everybody in that movement. For a lot of people, though, this whole concept of take back my country is about this feeling of you know, this black man took my country and is ruining it, you know. That's what's beneath the surface. There's a lot of racism. I've run into a lot of it throughout the years, especially when I was living in Arizona, where people would assume that because I was white, they could chime in with various racist, you know, perspectives and think that I would go along with that. And I think that it's useful to understand ethnic backgrounds and understand that much of the economic prosperity of this country was originally founded upon the enslavement of Africans, and understanding how, you know, this acquisition of land in this country was largely about having superior military power, guns, you know, and that's how we took it from Native Americans, was this military might kind of component, and then understanding how it affected the Japanese to be put in internment camps during World War II because of fears of spies and that kind of thing like that, and just the history of Hispanics in the Southwest, and understanding, you know, our relationship to various cultures, and how, you know, in America it's been largely about overpowering others, and understanding that, and understanding how that has affected people, while at the same time, you know, as we go along and we do understand history, we also understand that we're not imprisoned by our past, and ultimately who we are is not so much about who our parents and grandparents, etc., were, so much as what do we believe, what have been our experiences. And ethnicity, I think, over time is going to matter less and less. There's this lyric from one of the recent Red Hot Chili Pepper albums that goes, "Mix it up until there are no pedigrees," which makes me think about, over time, you know, over many, many generations, there's going to be a great complexity where a person can have, instead of just like a singular identity of I'm Russian, then, you know, they could have 16 different ethnic backgrounds, to the point where it's just too complicated and blended to matter that much. And I think a lot of times when we imagine aliens from another planet, a lot of times there's this kind of uniform look that we imagine as to how they appear, and that may have to do with this underlying feeling that as much as we pay attention to ethnic differences on this planet, that the direction that we're going, because aliens can be a projection of how we imagine ourselves in the future, we're moving towards a greater sense of oneness, in which we care less about skin color, and we care less about the individual shapes of eyes and noses and other facial components and all that crap, and just start looking beneath the surface to the essence of somebody, and really pay attention more to their personality and their energy, as opposed to how can we categorize them based upon ethnicity. Because this tendency to care a lot about the specifics of someone's ethnic background, I think it has its roots in a more tribal mentality that early humans had about keep your own safe and keep yourself protected from the other. And that a lot of times in the past, in part because of religious conditioning, people were supposed to marry their own and have children with their own. And it's really only been in the last couple of generations, in this country in particular, where different kinds of multicultural dating has been more accepted, but it's still, in certain areas of this country, incredibly taboo, which is, I think, a sign of ignorance, because anytime that you limit others or you limit yourself based upon factors that are basically not about their choices that they're making, but about what they've inherited genetically, you're showing ignorance. Because people there's so many different ways that we can keep ourselves chained up in terms of our identity and our true essence. And being imprisoned in a certain kind of role or a certain kind of identity because of ethnic heritage is one of the ways in which people can stop themselves from really truly becoming who they are. And people can put that on other people and keep them blocked. And I think people should be free to pick and choose what they like and what they don't like. You know, if there's certain aspects of cultural heritage that they like, then keep it. If there's others that they don't, then get rid of it. Kind of like family religious identity. If there's aspects of how your family has identified themselves in terms of their belief systems, in terms of their religious belief systems, or just general philosophical perspectives, then pick and choose what works for you. I've also noticed that with ethnic stuff that sometimes I think it can be used in a negative way to justify nasty personality traits. If somebody is aggressive, has a abrasive personality or temperament, or a coldness or aloofness or whatever, then they can say, oh, well, that's because I'm this or that, that's where that comes from. So it can be a way of taking away, giving away responsibility for one's own actions and behaviors. It could be that you're aggressive in your tone and personality not because of your ethnicity, but because you have unresolved anger issues and need to deal with some family stuff or whatever. So ultimately I feel that it's useful to understand the differences of not just our own ethnic backgrounds and how they have been influential over time, but understanding all people in a historical sense, but not limiting other people or limiting ourselves, because there's so many more important things than where did people come from, and who were their parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents, and where did they live, and what do they look like, and these kind of more superficial aspects of personality, as opposed to, okay, who am I really? What am I here to do? What do I really care about? And what do I identify with as me?